Coming up in our newscast tonight. The high-level talks to iron out details for the upcoming Inter-Korean Summit wrapped up quickly, and the date for the historic event has been confirmed to be April 27th. At a special ceremony in Texas, the first South Korean F-35A jets are unveiled. The fifth-generation stealth fighters equipped with advanced weapon systems are expected to greatly enhance the nation's defense capabilities. Trade officials from Seoul and Washington are close to finalizing amendments to the bilateral agreement. While easing safety environmental regulations on U.S. automobiles, Korea secures exemption from steel tariffs as well as key positions on various products. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang NEWSCENTER. Welcome, I'm Daniel Choi. The date is now set. A historic inter-Korean summit will be held on April 27th. The decision was reached by high-level delegates from Seoul and Pyongyang who met at the border village of Panmunjom today. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Oh Jung-hee starts us off.
The two Koreas will hold their third historic summit on April 27th at the Peace House located on the South Korean side of the truce village of Panmunjom. The announcement came after high-level delegations from Seoul and Pyongyang wrapped up their meeting at Panmunjom on Thursday afternoon.
South and North Korea agreed to work together to successfully hold an inter-Korean summit in view of the historic significance it will have in terms of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, building peace, and improving inter-Korean relations. With the agreement of both leaders, the South and the North have decided to hold the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit on April 27th at the Peace House in Panmunjom.
For now, it's expected that the Seoul-Pyongyang summit will only last a day. To prepare, the two Koreas will hold a couple of working-level talks. The first round will be held on April 4th to discuss protocol, security, and press coverage for the summit. The second meeting will cover communications, but when and where it's held hasn't yet been decided. Seoul and Pyongyang will continue exchanging documents as they prepare. South Korea has had three major topics for President Moon Jae-in to discuss with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un: denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula, building a lasting peace with lower tensions, and finally, improving inter-Korean relations. The two Koreas agreed Thursday that the three items should be taken up at the summit, but the topics couldn't be narrowed down any further. Asked about the agenda of the summit, North Korea's Lee Sun-kwon only said, quote, "Our agenda covers everything in inter-Korean relations." Seoul has also left open the possibility of holding another round of high-level talks in April to iron out the details. The North Korean side did not mention anything about denuclearization at Thursday's high-level talks, but South Korea's unification minister reaffirmed that denuclearization is a central topic that's been discussed since the January 9th high-level talks and during several trips back and forth between Seoul and Pyongyang. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
In line with the decision to meet in a month's time, we now take a look back at previous talks between the divided countries. Concerns still linger, though, over the possibility of Pyongyang's hidden agenda, but some analysts express confidence this time it could be different. Cha Sang-mi shares with us their take on the matter.
The leaders of South and North Korea have only met twice since the Korean War ended in 1953. The first Inter-Korean Summit was held in June 2000 in Pyongyang between then South Korean President Kim Dae-jung and then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. The second summit came 7 years later between Kim Jong-il and the next South Korean President Roh Moo-hyun, a former democracy activist. The purpose of both those summits was to get Pyongyang to give up its nuclear programs, but denuclearization remained elusive. On Thursday, the date was set for the third Inter-Korean Summit, this time between President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un on April 27th at the Peace House in the border village of Panmunjom. Concerns remain about North Korea's intentions, but some experts think the first summit in over a decade will be different.
This time, North Korea is not being capricious. In the past, they broke their agreements many times, but this is the first time the North's leader has claimed a willingness to denuclearize and a need for talks with South Korea and the U.S.
Another expert says North Korea seems more at ease communicating with the current liberal South Korean administration.
The North Korean government would think trust can be restored with South Korea under the liberal Moon Jae-in administration, as a successor of the Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun administrations and their sunshine policy.
And some say with the U.S.-North Korea summit planned in May, the issue of denuclearization will be discussed thoroughly.
The USA government has made it very clear that denuclearization will be the prerequisite for the successful outcome at the summit meeting between the North Korea and the United States.
Experts say the inter-Korean summit planned in April will serve as a stepping stone to the talks to follow between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
President Xi Jinping's special envoy met Seoul's top security advisor Chung Eui-yong. They discussed various issues including China's recent summit with the North as well as issues concerning the denuclearization of the peninsula. For details, we turn to our Hwang Ho-jun at the top office.
The visit by the Chinese State Councilor shows Beijing does not intend to be left out of the loop in the ever-changing inter-Korean relationship. Yang Jiechi, a key Chinese diplomat and a member of the Politburo, met Thursday afternoon with South Korea's National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong. According to initial poll reports, South Korea's top security advisor expressed satisfaction at the surprise bilateral summit between the leaders of China and North Korea.
The Beijing-Pyongyang summit was significant. It reaffirmed Pyongyang's commitment to the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula as well as to the upcoming inter-Korean and U.S.-North Korea summits.
Chung also recalled his own visit to Beijing earlier this month as President Moon's special envoy when President Xi said China and South Korea are on the same page when it comes to critical issues concerning the peninsula and expressed support for Seoul's policy of establishing lasting peace in the region. Yang in return said the recent exchanges between Beijing and Pyongyang would only benefit the upcoming summit.
We think Kim Jong-un's recent surprise visit to Beijing and his meeting with President Xi Jinping will help the April summit between the two Koreas accomplish even more.
Amid the quickly changing situation, Yang stressed that both China and South Korea must continue to closely communicate with each other and seek to develop their bilateral relationship in accordance with the agreement reached by Presidents Moon and Xi. Last December, the two leaders agreed that war on the peninsula would be unacceptable. They also made a firm commitment to the peninsula's denuclearization, to work toward a peaceful resolution of the North Korean issue through dialogue and negotiation, and they agreed on the benefits of improving inter-Korean relations to resolve such issues. The meeting between Yang Jiechi and Chung Eui-yong turned into a dinner hosted by Chung shortly after they wrapped up their talks. Friday afternoon, Yang will pay a visit to President Moon Jae-in. Meanwhile, regarding the fixed date of the much-anticipated Seoul-Pyongyang summit in April, the Blue House spokesperson said this afternoon that the South Korean government will put its utmost efforts into preparing for it, especially now that they have a fixed date. He also said that he hopes the April summit will become a turning point in establishing peace on the peninsula and call for the public's unified support for a successful summit. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
There's been signs of new activity at North Korea's main nuclear complex. Recent satellite imagery suggests a reactor has been powered up following years of construction, a topic that's likely to come up during Washington and Pyongyang summit since the U.S. is focused on the regime's denuclearization. Park Hye-jun has more on the development that could put a damper on the peaceful mood in the peninsula.
Numerous reports are indicating fresh activity at North Korea's nuclear site. According to the New York Times, satellite imagery taken in February shows what appears to be emissions from a smokestack, suggesting a new North Korean reactor situated at the Yongbyon nuclear complex is firing up now after years of construction. Recent analysis by the Center for International Security and Cooperation at Stanford University also indicates that North Korea may have begun testing an experimental light water reactor. Both can be used to produce the fissile materials needed for nuclear bombs. Pyongyang has claimed that the plant was built to produce electricity for civilian use, but Jane's intelligence review cautioned that it's impossible to know for sure without international inspections whether the reactor is indeed for civilian electricity or whether it's for creating weapons-grade nuclear material. North Korea hasn't conducted any nuclear tests since last November. However, the activity at the reactor could raise tension as it comes at an especially sensitive time with the Trump-Kim talks coming up in the next few months. The new nuclear activity is likely to be the central issue for the talks, as the United States' core goal continues to be denuclearizing the North. And it raises the need for President Trump to not only push for North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons, but also the factories and reactors that create the material to build more weapons. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
South Korea's first F-35A stealth jet was unveiled at a rollout ceremony in Texas, arguably the most advanced fighters ever built. They are expected to significantly upgrade the nation's air defense capabilities. Park Ji-won gets us better acquainted with the main machines that symbolize Seoul and Washington's unshakable military alliance.
The first South Korean F-35A fighter aircraft made its public debut at a rollout ceremony held at Lockheed Martin's assembly line in Texas on Wednesday local time. Hundreds of key defense and military officials, as well as politicians from South Korea and the U.S. attended the ceremony. Seoul's Vice Defense Ministers Ho Ju-seok and the South Korean Air Force's Vice Chief of Staff Lee Sung-yong were among the attendees. Vice Minister Seo stressed the fielding of the fighter jet is not simply an acquisition of jets, but also a symbolic representation of the ironclad alliance between South Korea and the U.S.
I request your continued interest and support for the fielding of the F-35 fighter jet so that it can serve as a critical asset in protecting the South Korean airspace. I also hope for the continued peace and stability on the Korean peninsula stemming from the impervious ROK-US alliance.
In a video message, South Korea's Defense Minister Song Young-moo dubbed the fifth-generation stealth aircraft as the world's best fighter jet, saying its deployment will greatly enhance the nation's ability to maintain the security of the nation's sovereign airspace. The F-35A jets have state-of-the-art radar evasion capabilities and an advanced weapon system, which are expected to significantly strengthen the country's defense against any provocation.
The technological capabilities of this fifth-generation fighter are unmatched anywhere in the world. The F-35 does more than transform an air force. It transforms a nation's armed forces. And it enables allies to maintain peace through strength and cooperation that spans the globe.
South Korea's Air Force also expects the advanced fighter jets to enhance the security of the Korean peninsula.
With aims to implement effective aerospace operations, we expect the F-35As to enhance our prompt precision strike capabilities.
6 F-35A jets will be manufactured for South Korea this year, and they will be delivered to Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, where South Korean pilots will undergo the respective training before the jets are delivered to Cheongju Air Base in South Korea next March. The South Korean Air Force aims at securing a fleet of at least 40 F-35A units by 2021. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Following 3 months of talks, Seoul and Washington made significant progress in amending the FTA. Both sides expressed satisfaction with the concessions they squeezed out of each other thus far. Kim Hye-sung outlined some of the key changes.
In a joint statement, Seoul's Trade Minister Kim Hyun-jong and U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said the two countries were pleased to announce that they have reached an agreement in principle on the amendment of their bilateral trade deal. The statement released Wednesday night local time said the agreement addresses issues on investment, tariffs, automobiles, customs, and trade remedies. Seoul has agreed to lift some of its safety and environmental regulations and will allow U.S. automakers to ship Korea up to 50,000 vehicles each, up from 25,000 previously. Tariffs imposed on Korean pickup trucks exported to the U.S. will be extended by 20 years to 2041. South Korea, on the other hand, secured revisions to the investor-state dispute settlement clause, and the two sides also agreed to improve the transparency of the trade dispute settlement process, which covers issues like anti-dumping duties. But as South Korea's trade minister mentioned at a press conference Monday, there is no further opening of Korea's agricultural market or the mandatory use of U.S. auto parts. The announcement comes less than 3 months since the first round of trade talks began in January. In the joint statement, Seoul and Washington said the agreement represents an important progress in improving Korea-U.S. trade and economic relations based on their strong and enduring security relationship. As well as the FTA amendment, there's an agreement on exempting South Korea from the Trump administration's 25% steel tariff measures. In exchange, South Korea's quota will be set at 2.68 million tons of steel exports a year, or 70% of its average annual shipments to the U.S. between 2015 to 2017. The arrangement with respect to steel products is expected to take effect on May 1st. Working-level officials are ironing out the details so that Seoul and Washington can finalize their amendments to the 6-year-old trade deal soon, which are subject to domestic procedures in both countries before the provisions can be brought into force. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
After President Moon Jae-in's proposal to amend the Constitution was submitted, it seemed Parliament members might get its act together. But with rival parties still very far apart on the content and the timing of a referendum, progress has been near a standstill. Kim Min-ji has the latest from the National Assembly.
It's been less than a week since the country's 3 major parties agreed to start earnest negotiations to craft a proposal to amend the Constitution. But already they're playing the blame game. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea says the opposition parties are wasting precious time, that all they're doing is criticizing the president's proposal and not putting out their own versions. The ruling party also took aim at a key idea of the opposition's, to have a prime minister picked or recommended by parliament. They say that could give Korea a prime minister who doesn't get along with the president and could paralyze the government. The next round of talks, the ruling party says, must be productive. At the same time, the main opposition Liberty Korea party has been calling on the ruling party to come up with its own proposal and not use the president's as a basis for negotiations. The Conservative Party has refused to accept the president's bill, saying that the National Assembly should be at the forefront of the revision. The Conservatives are now working on a proposal, with party lawmakers going over the contentious points, such as the power structure and the timing of a referendum. Meanwhile, the centrist Padamita party said it's the ruling party's irresponsible behavior that's slowing down progress on constitutional revision at the National Assembly, on top of all the bills stacking up in Parliament related to people's livelihoods and reform. It warned that if the ruling party does not change its stance during the April extraordinary session, parliamentary affairs won't get far. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The number of high schoolers per teacher is falling here in Korea. At the same time, there's been a dramatic dip in the rate of graduates advancing to higher levels like universities or junior colleges. It could be viewed as a concerning development in a traditionally studious culture, but according to our Won Jung-hwan, there's more to this trend than meets the eye.
A few generations ago in South Korea, going to college was something unusual. Now it's the opposite, so much so that those who don't go are sometimes labeled as failures. By the end of high school, for most of South Koreans, it's been 12 or more years in school. Late-night cram sessions and test prep classes with the hope of getting into a prestigious university, preferably in the capital Seoul. The percentage of high school graduates enrolling in higher education has risen significantly since 1990s, reaching a high watermark in 2008 at 83.8%. It appeared to be a mark of huge progress in the local education sector. Since the turn of the decade, however, the trend seemed to have started shifting, and the rate has fallen steadily since then. According to the Social Indicators report from Statistics Korea, the rate last year for high school grads heading into tertiary education dipped by 0.9 of a percentage point from the previous year to 68.9%. While that's not a massive drop, the ongoing decline could mean something is changing in Korean society. Experts point to the changing career ambitions of young people and reform in the educational system.
Various reasons have contributed to the drop in the enrollment rate. First, there's been some controversy about the opportunity cost of getting a college degree. Second, during the Lee Myung-bak administration, the government opened more than 20 specialized trade schools as an alternative to university, encouraging high school graduates to skip college and head straight into the workforce.
Another reason for the decline in enrollment rates could be changing perceptions of how best to pursue a career. Despite the persistent view in Korea that a degree confers overwhelming advantages, some students say they can do just fine without one, or just wait till later.
I don't think my future is guaranteed even if I go to college. I think getting a job all depends on my skills and experience.
Whether you go to college or not, the most important thing is doing what you want. And I don't think it's too late to take some time and think about what you want and maybe go to college at some point down the road.
Even though it's still widely thought that not going for higher education badly hurts your chances in the Korean job market, the numbers could be telling us that society is accommodating more of those who choose a different path. 원정환, Arirang News.
Concerns and complaints mount as fine dust levels in the nation worsen. In response, the government laid out another set of measures to tackle the health-threatening problem. Kim Mo-gyun explains how the new plans would work.
Korea's Environment Ministry has announced its plans to strengthen and widen the scope of its countermeasures against fine dust. Environment Minister Kim Eun-kyung at a meeting at the government complex in Seoul on Thursday said that the government will do everything it can to deal with the problem and that it is implementing more countermeasures. The extra measures include expanding areas subject to the emergency fine dust reduction measures to the public sector nationwide, suspending the operation of more coal-fired power plants in addition to the 5 plants that were already suspended, considering distributing free masks to daycare centers, kindergartens, and schools, and increasing the current fine dust emissions reduction target to between 35% and 40%. Regarding measures to reduce the fine dust that comes from outside of the country, the minister said that it will boost cooperation with China, which several reports claim is one of the major sources of the deteriorating air quality in Korea. It will do this by opening a Korea-China Environment Cooperation Center and publishing a report on the fine dust surveys jointly conducted by the two countries and Japan by the end of June.
Our cooperation with China on the issue was held sporadically in various sectors, but now with the Environment Cooperation Center set to open in June, I think we will be able to cope with the fine dust issue in a more integrated, systematic way.
The latest announcement comes amid continuing criticism over the effectiveness and narrow scope of the current measures. At around 4 p.m. Thursday, the number of people who signed a petition demanding the presidential office of Cheongwade to come up with a diplomatic solution to the problem with China surpassed the 202,000 mark. The presidential office is set to give an official response to the petition as it promised to answer any petition with signatories that exceed the threshold of 200,000 in less than 30 days. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, when can we go out and enjoy the spring weather without ever worrying about the dust?
Well, Daniel, currently the fine dust concentration is high in the metropolitan area, and because of the slow circulation in the atmosphere at night, it will be somewhat dusty until the morning. But into the day, the wind will scatter the dust away, so the concentration of fine dust will finally return to levels that are considered good. Now, meanwhile, the eastern regions and Daegu are still under dry weather advisory, and there have been frequent fires recently, so do take extra care with all fire hazards. Now, Seoul will start Friday morning at 9 degrees Celsius. Chuncheon and Daegu mark 6 and 8 degrees Celsius, and Busan starts at 11. It will get sunnier into the day tomorrow. Seoul warming up to 19 degrees. Gwangju and Busan peaking up to 21 and 16 degrees. Now it's going to remain nice and clear until the weekend, but then over on Sunday and also on Monday, the central region, including Seoul, is going to get wet. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have in store for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.